Hello, this is Tony Heller from RealClimateScience.com, setting the record straight about climate. In this video, I'm going to show you how the symptoms of global cooling and global warming, as explained by climate scientists, are identical. We're going to focus on the summer of 1976 and the winter of 1976-1977. The summer of 1976 brought some very extreme weather. The Big Thompson River flood above Loveland, Colorado was one of the worst floods in U.S. history. The flash flood occurred without warning. Hundreds of people died and hundreds of structures were destroyed. This house got carried downstream and landed on top of a bridge. Cars got completely flattened by boulders which were carried down in the flood. The Front Range of Colorado is one of the highest flood risk areas in the country. There's a reason why they call the city where I live Boulder. At the same time as the Colorado flooding, there was massive flooding going on in Pakistan. Nearly 2 million people were affected by the Pakistan floods, more than 11,000 houses were damaged, and more than 3,000 villages were left isolated. And at the same time there was flooding in Colorado and Pakistan, England was having their hottest and driest summer on record. Heathrow Airport reported 16 consecutive days over 30 degrees Celsius. The average central England maximum temperature that summer was almost 5 degrees warmer than this year. This graph plots summer 1976 Central England maximum temperatures in blue and this year in red. This year had 3 short heat waves which were widely hyped by the press, but in 1976 the heat waves were very hot and they were extended. And as I mentioned, the average summer maximum temperature in 1976 was 5 degrees warmer than this year. And at the same time as the heat wave in England, Oregon was hit by a massive pine beetle outbreak. Colorado was hit by terrible flooding in July, but by December we were having our driest winter on record. President Ford went to Vail to ski that Christmas like he usually did, but there was no snow. A minister is fasting. A radio station just finished broadcasting 24 hours a day, and a famous resort is resorting to Indian dancers, all in an attempt to bring snow to Colorado's ski areas. Well, there was no snow in Colorado, but it was snowing in Miami. Miami had their only snowstorm on record in January of 1977. Here's a picture of a kid in Florida sitting on their snow-covered car. And meanwhile, Alaska was very warm. In fact, Alaska was warmer than Florida on January 19, 1977. National Geographic described it as the year the weather went wild. There you can see the Florida citrus crop ruined by ice. This is a man digging his car out of snow in Buffalo, New York. I spent my Christmas break in Boston that winter, and I remember the snow was incredible. I saw an old woman carrying her groceries over a 5-foot-high pile of snow outside of her apartment. California was having one of their worst droughts on record. Governor Brown warned of a drought disaster and said hard choices face California. The freakish weather of 1976-1977 was blamed on an errant jet stream. There was a huge ridge over Alaska which was bringing very warm, dry weather to the west, and then a giant dip down into the eastern U.S. which brought cold and snowy weather. Climate experts at the time blamed this sort of wavy jet stream on global cooling. This was from Science News on March 1, 1975. They had a graph from the National Academy of Sciences showing a huge amount of cooling after the 1940s. And the text read, the principal weather change likely to accompany the cooling trend is increased variability, alternating extremes of temperature and precipitation. This should sound familiar because climate alarmists say these exact same things now, except about global warming instead of global cooling. And then they went on, during cooler climatic periods, the high-altitude winds are broken up into irregular cells by weaker and more plentiful pressure centers, causing formation of meridional circulation. And this diagram shows the wavy jet stream which is blamed on global cooling. Now fast forward to 2015. There you see the exact same diagram of the wavy jet stream, only now scientists are blaming it on global warming. A 2015 study by Francis and Vavras, evidence for a wavier jet stream in response to rapid Arctic warming. So on the left we have the global warming induced wavy jet stream, and on the right we have the global cooling induced wavy jet stream. They look pretty much identical. In 2006, the New York Times announced the endless summer. That didn't work out too well for them, so now they blame all the cold weather on global warming. They call these deep dips in the jet stream the polar vortex, which is of course caused by global warming. However, in the 1970s, they blamed the polar vortex on global cooling. During January 1978, they ran this article, International Team of Specialists Finds No End in Sight to 30-Year Cooling Trend. And they said, a gradual increase in area of the northern circumpolar vortex, the massive flow of frigid air around the Arctic, has been recorded by Doctors Angel and Korshover of NOAA. So in 1978, the polar vortex was caused by cooling, but now it's caused by global warming. Time magazine had the same story in 1974, another ice age. Scientists have found other indications of global cooling. For one thing, there has been a noticeable expansion of the great belt of dry, high-altitude polar winds, the so-called circumpolar vortex. And they blame drought, floods, tornadoes, and every other bad form of weather on global cooling. So as you can see, the symptoms of global warming and global cooling are identical. This is what's called ad hoc science. Academics are simply making up sciencey sounding explanations. What they're saying has no basis in reality, but because they're climate scientists, you're not allowed to question them. If they want to control public policy with their nonsensical ad hoc junk science, you simply have to let them do it. Or so we are told by the press and politicians. But we don't have to accept that. America was founded by people with a vision to escape this sort of tyranny. Americans make our own decisions. We're not controlled by dishonest members of the academic elite. Visit Toto on the web at realclimatescience.com. He's been pulling back the curtain on junk science and propaganda for a long time.